Okay, this is good to know. It's because I copied the JSX types directly into the folder instead of using a manual build process. That's hilarious. This is like no one other than me had ever done anything here. It's looking for them in types folder. I mean, let me try one more time. Sometimes it works a second time. Okay. Okay. Is it not even in the source folder? No, it's in a top level types folder. That's funny. This is this is this is actually, and it's right here, right? Sorry, like I haven't been in here in like. Okay, so if I delete this now, this should definitely work. Sorry, I built this repo like 5 years ago and I haven't done. All right, ta-da. Okay, and it creates our dist. Okay, okay. So now we just need to update our code to actually run. Yeah, it needs keyed Villa.js Lite. Yeah, sorry, I'm just catching up. I did get to it, I think, properly eventually, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. And then what else do we need here? We need. Oh, I think I just actually need the types folder to exist. Let's see if we can just swap out a bunch of stuff here because index is fine. This is what it's expecting, including create selector. I think that's a little bit cheeky, but let's do it. Okay, let's look at the core from lib. Okay, so lib is where we're going to do all our work. So we still need to untrack. So let's switch this from this to alien signals and see what we get. Okay. So they don't have reset tracking. What do they call it? This is a little bit of an API swap up here. Where's alien signals? Index. We have, what do we have? Pause tracking, resume tracking. So reset becomes resume. Resume tracking. Okay. Shallow ref becomes signal, I think. Stop becomes. What the hell is stop? They have like a global stop. I don't think we're going to need this logic. I'm okay with this because what we're going to do. Let me see here. Untrack we need. Root has a dispose function. So I just need to convert effect scope into effectively. Sorry, we don't need shallow ref. I need effect scope into this API. So I think we can literally just, and we need untrack. Yeah, okay. So we need, because const dispose will equal effect scope function, but not quite. Oh, how do I do this? Okay, it's fine. Worry about the disposal in a minute. Because like, I kind of want to do this, but my gut is that I can't do that. I mean, if you've never seen Marco and Marco 6, this is their intention, but then they realized we kind of hit a point where we realized that runtime reactivity was valuable. Like they even have cross modular analysis where you could actually like they basically could know the reactive graph by analyzing cross file like where everything happens. And even with that, we ended up back at a runtime approach. So yeah, I mean, I can picture a system like that. I'm just yeah, I have skepticism. Okay, so then because of this, yeah. So but yeah, and actually we need to untrack the function. I think is the key, right? We have to go untrack. I think the problem is effects. I have no way to get the dispose function into here. I know it won't get called right away, but I might have a hard time. It's okay. We're not going to release the root. Um, I don't. Oh, right. But we might need to release the root. Anyways, let's cross that road when we get to it. Because then we basically have to get the const return. Yeah, so we need to basically do something like this. Let ret this return ret. So already this is a lot simpler. Why am I just being? Oh, it's because it's down here. We don't need any of this ownership stuff, hopefully, because it will just work. Shut up, TypeScript. I'm hoping effect scope runs synchronously. I guess we'll find out. I wonder how cleanup's going to work. Huh. Yeah, it's interesting because there is slight differences with the view ownership model. I might be better served to just leave what we're referring to as the garbage in, because then it's apples to apples with the current view thing. Because I'm looking at this and I'm realizing that like, how do you register? There's no mechanism to register your own cleanups, right? Like they have effect scope, which is great because I'm gathering it. I'm gathering this gathers up the nested effects, but how do I don't think I can arbitrarily attach my own stuff to it. I might not actually need it for this though, because we're just trying to do the benchmark. Right? Because let's give this a shot. We're just gonna have this be a no op for now. But like I don't think there's a way to register your own stuff on their ownership graph. Yeah, and then the scope cleans it out, but there's no. It's the auto registrations there like us, but they don't have manual registration as well. I'm just gonna no op it and hope that we don't need manual cleanup for what we're doing. Similarly, I think we can just. What's their? What's their? Does their effect? Is their effect function is probably not recursive? It's fine. I can write that in fairly straightforward. Effect function. Yeah, there's no previous values or concepts of that. That's fine. We can do this. So we still need it as v effect. Okay. We can remove the context API because we don't care. We can remove the manual cleanup. We just need to I'm just going to call this value. And then what we're going to do essentially is now we won't need the cleanup because it'll be inside an effect scope. See, the reason we had, oh, yeah, this is like really, I did some pretty heavy hacking around this stuff, eh? All we have to do is do this basically. So I call it current, but this should be enough. Much simpler wrapper. Yeah, okay, beautiful. Memo. I used a shallow ref and with an effect. Oh wow. It's because of the way Vue used to do the computeds. That's funny. Okay, so I think we can just do this with do they are there computeds recursive? Yes, their computeds are recursive. Good. Okay. That makes life a little bit easier. Although there's no way to set the initial value, is there? No. Okay. That's fine. I actually don't need the initial value here, so we can make this, what is it, computed. Are they? Do they use equality? Is there a way to say like don't or do equality check in here? Um. mm, 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 mm. I mean, I guess we can look at the implementation to understand if the computeds do equality checks. Um, sorry, what was it? What was the underlying thing again? Computed getter, which is, where is it? Computed getter. Right, but it's a computed. Okay, so it's this, which is the, okay. Let's look at the computed. Is there what's the computed type actually? I mean, oh, actually, the update function is what they inject, isn't it? It's what we saw here. Yeah, it's literally right here. So they do equality check by default. Um, that's fine. I don't think there's any downside to that. We're just going to ignore that. So we're going to assume a quality check by default. For the JS framework benchmark, we're not going to get an issue. So I think we can actually literally just go computed function, which means that this whole memo thing actually goes away. We can actually just export computed as, yeah, I like that. It's funny. I implemented like a bunch of other helpers like lazy and stuff. I don't even know if I want to. We don't need this for the benchmark, so I'm not going to put it in here. Context API. Don't need it for the benchmark. Tempted to get rid of. All right, sorry. So no actual. Okay, we need map. We don't need create provider. We don't need resolve children then. This makes life a lot easier, getting rid of all the extra stuff that we don't actually need. I don't even think we need split props because we need merge, but we don't need split. Yeah, whatever. It's not broken, so I don't actually care. What's this one? Create selector. Okay, I'm gonna have to rewrite the logic for create selector. I'm not too worried about that though. We don't need global context. It's gone now. We don't need context. It's gone. And then all we need here, export, was it computed as memo from alien signals. We don't need stop. We don't need computed. And then the last little bit of editing we have to do here is, yeah, this old version of selector was a real masterpiece. Okay, so let's change this to signal. And then what's type of signal? Okay, let's just any this for now. And then we just have to make sure that we actually set the signal properly here. Because L.value, that's a read. So this should be just call the function as the thing. And then increment the counter. Where's the right? It should be up here. Right. It's the only dot. There's no more dot values anywhere, right? Dot value. Okay. And just we know for sure, right, that it's they don't use dot value, right? Just sanity check. It's the knockout API. Yeah. Yeah, they don't use dot value. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Okay. So then, other than this not building, because I'm just going to be missing some exports and I'll trim in a second, I think this is it. Okay. Lib, and then index is missing context. That's fine. We don't need it. Lazy, create context, use context, all also not needed. Cleanup's a no op, but let's see if I can build. Looks good. Let's look at the dist. Okay, one thing I have to do is make sure that rollup is excluding stuff we want to exclude from here, like alien signals. Alien signals. If you didn't notice, this also creates a hyperscript renderer and a lit style renderer. But let's try running this again. Now, if this all works, we should mostly have just our user code. Okay, beautiful. And then whatever version of DOM expressions this is. Okay, that looks. It's in roll down in alpha now. Yeah, I haven't been keeping up on it. Sorry, this is a little bit deeper than some people might have wanted to go, but I think we're good. So all we need to do now is go into JS Framework benchmark. I'm going to do this really cheesy way, which is just copy this folder because we want to run both of them. And we have to just change a couple things here. rename to view. Let's call it view alien JSX. And then it's not even view anymore, actually, isn't it? It's just, if I change the name right now, it's going to lose the alphabetical sorting order, and I don't want to deal with that. Let's call it, I'm just going to call it alien JSX. And then we have to change this to alien signals. Whatever version it's at, 1.013, if I saw it correctly. Yeah. And then we'll reinstall our. We actually don't need to that's fine, whatever. Alien JSX. And actually, sorry, there's a few places where we should change it. Alien JSX keyed. I'm not seeing it. It should be in the, yeah, alien JSX keyed. And then I'm going to npm install this one more time to get alien signals in here. And then I'm going to replace the view RxJSX code with the code that we haven't published yet. So I'll just replace this dist with this dist. Copy, paste. And if all goes well, we will be able to npm run build prod. All right. And then when I go into here and go to localhost 8080 and choose a framework, not found package lucky. Fix that. Sorry. Let's do this. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how they have different keys here. I think I don't. This is not something I want to fiddle with. It's just like the worst name. Okay, what do you know? It doesn't even work yet. Anyways, let's see what the console error. All right, let's not build prod. Let's see what we have done wrong here. Just build it dev. Oh, I probably don't even have a dev build on here. Yeah, no, I don't. Where is it? Wrong folder. Oh, just dev. All right. Yeah, it's what we thought it was. Can access dispose before initialization. Oh, lovely. Okay. Okay. Let's see if we can solve this. It's exactly what I knew the problem was going to be. It was sorry, lib. It was this problem up here when I tried to make the root. Okay. It might be just as simple as effect scope returns a function that's void. If as long as we wrap it with a function, I expect this will work because no one's going to be accessing it synchronously. So let's try that. Paste. All right. Okay. Not working yet, but it's not crashing. Okay, so let's see if there's something wrong in the actual implementation that I forgot to update. Yeah, here's our problem right here. We need alien signals signal, otherwise we're not actually going to be able to do anything here. And then where did we call ref? Signal, and then selected data. Oh, do you know what? Yeah, we actually have to change this. This might actually be using the fact that Vue does deep, like stores. This actually might be because if you look at it, the label is not a separate signal, which means that in order to actually do this properly, we have to make this more. Yeah. Okay, I see what's wrong. This requires a few other updates. Okay, it's selected. It's selected. I just want to make sure everything else is fine. It's selected. It's selected. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So all these helper functions need to be changed. Data. Oh, sorry. It's funny. I wonder if I had started with the knockout implementation, I would have been in better shape. Because of all of these, like, yeah, like what did I do here? Da, 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 da. See, like this here is already a problem. It's got to be more like, because each label needs to be a signal as well, which is missing. It's because Vue has automatic deep, which I don't think Alien Signals does not have any concept of deep reactivity, which is good because this will actually be more performant. Because the Vue RX version was actually using proxies, so I'm actually expecting. Yeah, this isn't apples to apples anymore. I'm expecting this to actually jump about 0.03, even without alien signals, purely from this reimplementation here. I wonder if I had used shallow ref, that would have been a better comparison point. Yeah, the proxies are always going to be slower, so I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. Okay, so let's see if we've killed dot value. No, there's still more. Is that the last dot value? Okay, we've killed dot value. Can we create 1,000 rows yet? Yes, we can. Can we select a row? But the selector is not working properly. Okay, that's fine. Can we clear 1,000 rows? Yes, we can. Okay. Can we swap rows? Yes, we can. Okay. Okay, so stuff's coming along. My guess is we won't be able to update every 10th row though. Yeah, okay. So we have to create the nested signals. Okay, that's easy enough to do. Here, this should just be signal there. And then the label. Yeah, I need to actually change the view one to be the same if we want to actually compare this apples to apples, to be fair. So the only thing else we need to change is going to be the row rendering. We need to make sure that the row, where's the row component wrap? Row, yeah. The row component needs to make sure that the label is a signal. I think that's it. Create 1,000 rows. Update every 10th. Row label is not a function. Okay. What did I do wrong? Why is row.label not a function? Row label is a function. Right? Signal is a function, right? It is a function. Label, label. Oh, it's probably because I missed reading from it right here. Create 1,000 rows. Well, let's see what it is. What is it? Label is a function. Okay. All right. Looks like label is a function. Let's continue. When does label stop becoming a function? When it becomes a string. Okay. Yeah. So didn't I just fix this? It was what I thought. It's because I didn't call it as a function here, but okay. Oh, plus. Okay, sorry. The plus equals was the problem. All right, create 1,000, update every 10th row. Yay. Okay. All right. Progress. Okay. So we can swap, we can clear, we can create 10,000, we can append. Okay. So we have the makings of a thing. The only unfortunate part about this example is that the original Vuex JSX version is not comparable. So what we're going to do is the only difference is replacing shallow ref with signal here. We're going to actually just copy the code into our other repo, or sorry, other one. And now this way, Vuex JSX is actually comparable. I probably went with store type APIs because like as a like I thought it was kind of like the expectation shallow ref. Like the as a Vue user, I also I don't think knew about shallow ref. Oh right, but the shallow refs the shallow refs are gonna have dot value on them, aren't they? Oh right, okay, it's fine. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna undo my changes because it will be still easier to just change this to shallow ref and add the one extra thing than it is to go through and do the rest of this crap. Ref. Okay, shallow ref, and then we want to add label is shallow ref, and then the only one that we're going to have to change now is the update part because it will now have to be dot value, and then inside the render where we look at the row here, where is it, row list, we have to go dot value because our JSX is not like Vue has some stuff where like it okay build prod and then cd dot view rx JSX build prod. Okay, and now if everything is good, this one works for everything. Oh no, do you know what? I forgot the test selection. Yeah, selection's broken. Damn it. It's fine. We'll get that in a second. Let's see if URX JSX works. URX JSX create 1,000, update every 10th. Yeah. Swap rows, selection working properly. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we just need to fix the selector and then we'll be done for the other one. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Yeah, I did not know that either. That's we learn stuff on the stream, don't we? Okay, cool. So yeah, let's just fix the selector. It's probably just something that I did silly in here. So let's do that. Alien JSX cd dot view alien. There's actually nothing view about this, but that's fine. Um, Actually, you know what? Let's just to get the stupid thing. Let's just say let's just do alien signals. We'll just call it alien signals, and then we'll have the version, and then whatever. It's kind of a lie, but it's purpose for our purposes demonstration standpoint. That's fine because this is okay. So then, what am I missing with selector? Selector selected. More than likely, the problem is actually something I didn't do right here. So I read the source, the V, and then I go through each one, and then I do a comparison, and then I set it, and then oh, do you know why selector is not working? This is the one place that uses cleanup. Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Yes, that's why we can't do. That's why we can't use the selector here without because the main reason I actually use on cleanup is for internal reference counting in React system. I use it for suspense. I use it for error boundaries. This is like basically the only real reason why your pure functions would clean up. Um, but yeah, I mean, it literally can't clean up because I have no way of registering with the ownership graph. Okay, we can just not use create selector. Um, I also have a slower implementation of create selector, but I mean, I don't want to. It's possible that it's slower than just not using a selector at all, so I don't want to risk that for the sake of this thing. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to um, also remove create selector here, which is simply means that we just change this to selected equals row ID. And now create selector is gone. All right. See if this works. Done. Okay. Can you use the end tracking functions to subscribe to nothing and clean up? Yeah, I guess the question is how do I trigger it, Milo? Like, um, look, let's look at this because um, when you go is selected, you're running inside a reactive scope. It's not final cleanup. I just want that run to clean up. Like this cleanup runs every time it's re-rendered. It goes, okay, because it basically always counts up and counts down. It's just a counter. So every time it runs, it decrements and increments and decrements and increments, and then it's like when it's actually zero, it goes, okay, I'm going to delete it. That end tracking trick, I think, is for like final cleanup. It just means like when you put a stop on an effect, the effect never exists anymore. This is actually just part of the cycle. So yeah, I don't think this actually work. That will actually work. All right. In any case, we have all our working approaches. So we can go back here and actually run them all. We have, and what's the last one? Keyed view alien JSX. So let's run the benchmark while we chat. Actually, not. Do we care about memory benchmarks? We can cut our time significantly if we don't care about memory benchmarks. Let's not care about memory benchmarks. Stop. It's like, can I get in there fast enough? Okay, I think I did. It's got a mind of its own. Oh man, I swear I. All right. Oh, I see the problem. I didn't stop the right window. It's like the problem is it steals the mouse focus. So even okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think that we actually want benchmark 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09. We're not going to worry about memory right now. Let's do this. All right, cool. Okay, so we're going to let this run for a minute, but we can chat. I'm actually pretty excited. I got a couple more. It's been like a month since I did a stream, so I actually have a. Oh yeah, see, this is something sort of new on the JS framework benchmark. It actually, instead of running through all of them, it used to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 for the first one, 1, 2, 3, 4 the second one, the next one. Um, Now it actually runs them cross sectionally. It'll do like 1 for the first one, and then like 1 for the next one, and then 1 for the next one, then 2. Like it goes the opposite way. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah. I've been away, but I've been writing. Some people said they enjoyed some of the exploration that we've been doing, like the HackMDs, which that makes me happy because that's like where I'm doing my work. And I wanted to. I've been working a lot on SSR recently, but I actually think, given the theme of the stream, I actually want to do a deep dive on Deep, which is something that I've been struggling with for recently because of this conversation of split effects. Because for those who don't know, Vue has always had split effects, kind of like React. The dependency arrays. Back in the day, they called it watch. Even before the term effects came out, Vue used watch. So they had like signals, or whatever they call their refs, like their data, and then they had computeds, and then they had watchers. They had like these three concepts, and the watches were split essentially, and it meant that for basic cases like tracking signals, it's like the on operating install. It's really easy, but occasionally you get that case where you're like, I have deep reactivity and I want to listen to everything below that point, right? And when you have a combined effect API, you don't need to really worry about it. And like when you're using computeds and stuff, you can just track in. But when you have like split effects, it's kind of a pain to traverse exactly what you need. Like if there's conditionals, logic can be dynamic here. You can only hit certain paths in certain conditions on one side, just do it again when you do the actual side effect on the other side. Like what if it's like do the thing? And this poses some challenges, right? This is probably the only thing about split effects that really irk me. So because deep reactivity really likes the fact that you can kind of discover the reactivity as you're doing the side effect of the process, where split effects kind of forces you to discover up front. So I actually wrote a HackMD about this concept, and then I actually went in and wanted to look at deep, because Vue has had this deep ability for ages. Of course, they have a warning on it saying that the performance is bad. And as you know, if I part of my decision point of deciding if split effects are viable will have to be that the performance can't be bad. So, you know, set up a test, set up a benchmark, some criteria, and see if we can, if in fact, deep tracking is terrible. And the thing is, I already have a suspicion it is, because this is why Tanner moved off using Solid stores for his baseline implementation. In Solid, it was great; everything was tracking, and we could make the bridge to Vue and Svelte wonderfully. I mean, Svelte 5 wasn't out yet, but conceptually, it was the right path. But in React, the performance tanked because React has no way of doing granular updates. So you like, you'd add a component, you'd have to be like, listen to if anything changed below here, and then let React do the work, right? And whereas in a like reactive library, you're just like, introduce the data here, and we don't care where you read it. As you progress through the system, we'll make sure only the things that update changes. So like this was like the opposite bad side. Like on one side, if you treat all your data as immutable, React will love you because they're like, yes, we're used to just running marathons. So like they're like, has something changed? Well, yes, it's immutable. If anything has changed at all, you get a new object. So React's like, great. And then they'll diff it and they'll check in, they'll go through and re-render everything. But when you, and we can make that work in like Vue or Svelte or Solid. And especially VDOM libraries like old Svelte and like and Vue, like they have the diffing mechanisms built in. But it really sucked for Solid, and it would suck for Vue Vapor and suck for Svelte 5, because we got rid of the need for this this virtual DOM concept, and it was really irksome for me. In Solid, this is always really important to me, so I'd come up with diffing out things, something called reconcile. We have approaches in Solid to basically convert immutable data back into reactive data. Like this is the start of my work on projections. It's the same problem as the selector problem. This is such a universal problem, and I realized that sorry, where was I going with this? We found ourselves in this kind of like split where either you catered to fine-grained reactivity and basically did everything granular, and then like let React have to deal with like messing around with like all this extra steps of like figuring out what has changed, or you cater to React, do a bunch of mutable diffs, make the us do that extra diff work we don't need to do the fine-grained updates. And when interfacing with React libraries, I've been used to that second option because like no one's going to rewrite Redux for you, right? And it doesn't make sense if Redux, for example, is built on immutable data structures. But it was kind of disappointing because it would never feel like Solid first or Vue or Svelte. Like obviously people made those other adapters and they're fine with it, but I wasn't, so we tried the other way, and it was just so bad for React because it was such a funny operation. Because not only did you have to track deep, so think about it, like the naive way to track deep is when you get to the store, like the property you care about, like store.user. The naive way is literally iterate over every property in the store and listen to it for the potential that it could change. So it creates a signal, because we create signals lazily in stores, and a subscription for every single property nested however and deep thing. So that's a huge overhead. That's probably unnecessary. And then secondly, even if we know as it changed, React has to know it changed later. So Tanner actually had to clone all the objects as well. I mean, to be fair, cloning could trigger a read. So like you could skip a step, so to speak, because the cloning would also read all the way down. So you just clone, do a deep clone. But like essentially in the process, we'd create like dozens, maybe hundreds of signal subscriptions, and also duplicate all the data. It was just like so bad for React. But it is super useful to have deep watchers on occasion. It is, and especially with split effects, you're kind of forced to. So is this a problem we can solve? And the answer is yes, and I'm going to show you how when we're done here. Yes, thank you, Edgar. Like the video, subscribe. Do the like, follow, subscribe. Whatever. It helps a lot. I definitely appreciate it. I know this is like the longest part, but where are we at? What test are we doing? We are doing. It looks like we're creating and clearing 1,000 rows, which is the first test. I wonder if the memory test I wonder if the benchmark field got ignored and we're actually doing the memory test right now. Because I figured we'd be done by about now. I mean, we're almost done. Right. I would check, but my computer's running it too fast. Yeah, they are running the memory test right now. Yeah, so my whole attempt to skip the memory test was lost. Although, you know what? Screw this. Since it now runs the tests horizontal, we don't actually have to wait. Before, we'd have to wait. because it'd have to go all the way through and it wouldn't start the next one until the memories. But because it's doing it the other way, we can just skip. So now we just need to go npm run results. And if we're right, yeah, there's the biggest benefit of the new approach. And we go to localhost 8080 WebDriver T results to design in text. Although it looks like my alien signals implementation didn't get tested. Wow. Why am I getting such bad results for View Vapor on this computer? I mean, I knew the selector test was bad, but this is just crazy. Okay. Well, let's run. It'll be faster just running one of them. I must have. Let's try. Oh, it's because I did dash instead of slash. Okay, fine. Let's run just the view alien JSX one. I was hoping View Vapor would be like my frame of reference here, but it's the thing is, because I was running them cross sectionally, we can't claim that my computer is running particularly bad for like one of the vertical slashes. It was horizontal. So View Vapor's slowness here on my computer is legitimate. Yeah, but oh, do you know what it is? It's because I'm using the version of View Vapor from January 25th. My repo's out of date. Oh, that's why. I bet you they've improved View Vapor in the last 2 months. Okay, I mean, we could fix that. What test are we on? Swap rows. That makes way more sense. It's you know what I'm gonna do? I've got my other computer here. I'm gonna fast forward my branch to the View Vapor branch on my other computer here while we wait, because it will interrupt me while I'm trying to do it, and then we'll pull it down, and then we'll get the latest View Vapor in a minute here. Sorry, guys. It doesn't really matter. I could have used Svelte runes or whatever as my. I just wanted like another reference, and I thought since today was View Day, we would use View Vapor as my other point of reference. Let's repositories, JS framework, benchmark. Sync fork, update branch. All right. Why is it View Day today? Evan called this out. No, no. I honestly, I was intending to do alien signals, like basically, the whole time I was off. I was like, what am I going to do? Everyone just keeps on asking me about alien signals. Oh, it's doing memory. Okay. See, that was much faster doing just the one of them. Let's go here. Stop the server. Get pull. All right, I need to. Oh, that's disappointing. Okay, let's. They're gonna make me undo my results JSON Actually, though, but it won't undo my. It's fine. I can yeah, it'll be fine. They're, they'll make me. They're making me redo my results JSON before I update. What is it? What do they want? Results TS. Oh, I guess it's fine. There's a folder that has the results in it, so I shouldn't lose what we already did. Oh yeah. Okay. Now let's stop showing me that. And then what we want to do is go into here and go cd.view vapor npm install npm run build prod. Bam. Okay. And then start. Just pm start. And then exact same for view vapor. All right. I know you guys enjoy like over the years I've come to just love watching the screen just flash in front of me over and over and over again. I know this is like the long part. We're almost through. The version that Evan posted, I think, had alien signals in it, where this version has non-alien signals in it. So like, I mean, this is the thing. Everyone should always, as I said, because of the variance, everyone should take it a grain of salt. Like whenever you see things posted from people on the JS Framework benchmark, even me on the stream right now, don't consider it official. The only official results are the ones that run on Stefan's computer. If you see anything like this or anything like before it shows up like from a Stefan posting, basically ignore it. That's been always my thing. I've seen people claim crazy stuff and they mean it with the best of intentions, and they put it out and they show it and they do it, and then it ends up getting merged and it actually isn't faster or something. Like it's happened multiple times, more times than it's probably been accurate. So like I would say, like, if like someone like myself for my local run, you know, like sometimes you have no choice. Like when I'm benchmarking, like when I did that article where I like made 8 different versions of like this benchmark, and then or 4 different versions, then I testing as 5 different, like there's only so much I can do, right? Hopefully over a number of runs, I try my best, right? I ran everything like 5-10 times. Like I really try my best. But generally speaking, like a random posting of something like, hey, I just did an improvement, here's my JS framework benchmark, no one's going to post anything that's like, hopefully, like they don't want to risk it like backfiring. So like check your source. Like someone like Evan obviously isn't going to risk it, like him posting that and then like posting then the official results being slower. He's going to be as sure as possible before he posts that. But generally speaking, like my experience posting on Twitter, when I've like seen like would-be framework authors like doing this, many times their results that they get locally aren't, yeah, aren't actually necessarily indicative. So you got to be careful with that. Yeah, Mark. Sorry, I because of the benchmark, I can't like click on anything. It'll start like if I click on my screen where I have the chat, it's actually going to move the benchmark when the window opens up next. Will open up on that screen. It'll just like it has this like it was wherever my mouse is the focus is. It's going to like open the window up. But the answer to the question, yeah, Vue 3.6 is moving to alien signals. we're here kind of, we looked at alien signals, we saw the performance, we saw the kind of the elegance of the code. We're actually trying right now to see if alien signals makes much of any difference when it actually comes to a rendering benchmark, which is why I added View Vapor just for fun as like a um, third reference point. This sounds like my pet peeve about posting Lighthouse screenshots is Jay Larkey. Yeah, I mean, it's like the people who post desktop mobile speed scores instead of eh, and they don't use like web page they don't use like web.dev or whatever. They like literally do it on their local computer. I mean, that's actually two problems. The local computer one is this problem, and then the instead of using like web.dev, and then the using desktop instead of mobile is like using the CellX benchmark to talk about reactivity. Okay, we hit memory. Yeah, for some reason the benchmark filter is not working, but let's see if we can do npm run results. And then hopefully, if everything went well, we will have our results. Okay. Guess what? Guess what? Yeah. Yeah, this is actually kind of funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's exactly what we thought would happen. When I changed the signals version, it actually made the VueRx JSX faster than the proxy version, which is not surprising. The alien signals version is actually, you could see that it's slightly faster on many of these benchmarks, except for select row, but we couldn't do the selector for it. So the difference here, which is basically nothing, like we could probably get this on a different run, between, oh, this one's faster, alien signals and Vue 3.5 is essentially smaller in this benchmark than the difference between select row, which already is basically nothing. Just kind of put in thing. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The other thing that's interesting to me is these are running the same version of Vue. I wonder what the Vue Vapor implementation is. Are they using nested signals or are they using stores? Because I guess I never optimized my Vue RxJS implementation until just now. And I imagine they're using stores because, like, why would you? Oh no, they're using shallow ref. They are using shallow ref. Yeah. They're using shallow ref. So this is optimized. So, I guess the only way we can make this fair is if we remove create selector from this. But if you look at it on every other test, it's very, very, very close. So I would, and actually slightly in favor of Vue RxJSX. So DOM expressions and Vue Vapor are probably, as I imagine, very close in performance, almost indistinguishably so. This one has an advantage because of the selector test, but the impact of alien signals basically made no difference in this test. What if I'm using signals to render my 3D game on the server? Well, that is interesting, right? It depends on a couple things, right? Is the graph actually going to be your slowdown, or is it going to be the async, like the my gut? And I've seen this. This is the reason why even when it's hard when we talk about React and we talk about like 3Fiber and how they like had to use like concurrent mode and all the like things to improve the performance, like those like demos that Paul Henschel did a while ago with the cubes and all that kind of stuff. The problem is React re-renders everything, but we're already in a zone where we're not re-rendering everything. We're doing fine-grained, hyper-sensitive updates. So people have used Solid to make games like that because they're like, wow, like it's instantly better than using React for it, even with all the tricks you could do. Like React, you basically have to ignore its state library. You're just using its JSX. But even then, they're like, I'm not sure with the signals implementation is fast enough. Now, arguably, you could say that it might be possible that alien signals performance difference makes a difference, but I wonder if the abstraction or the overhead of the actual 3D like models themselves are going to be more impactful. Like the part of the reason that this is so huge is the DOM is expensive. Our 3D mesh is expensive. Right. There's no template cloning there. That's true. All of these mechanisms are using template cloning. In any case, I mean, this is not conclusive by any means. But it is kind of showing that like when looking at benchmarks, you have to look at what you're testing, right? What this does suggest is that Alien Signals has better cleanup than Vue 3.5 reactivity that's in both of these. You can see that it's higher. Like this is the same problem we have with Old Solid. Alien Signals has fixed this. Another thing that we can kind of see from this a little bit is, yeah, actually that's probably the only thing that I really see here. That you can see places where removal is involved, like replace rows and remove rows, can slightly better for Alien Signals. But these are still well within variance. Obviously, create selector has a big implementation different. It is interesting though that Alien Signals improvement over Vue 3.5 actually on its own made selection better. This is actually probably one of the most interesting things. So we didn't see it here because the selection was already good, but Alien Signals propagation here, I imagine, is one of the larger reasons why this is actually better without Create Selector. So there is this is a fan out scenario, right, where you have one selector doing 1,000 rows. This is probably pretty legit. I mean, and you could say maybe this is what everyone's talking about. Like they already were making, just switching to Alien Signals actually does improve that. Then again, this difference could also be a difference between DOM expressions and Vue RxJSX here, right? Or sorry, MVue Vapor. This could be just that the way we render in DOM expressions is more tailored to select row. Anyway, I don't know if we need to make many more conclusions from this. There's no way to register manual cleanups. At least that I figured out how to do. The problem I had was that I was using a different mechanism of maps to do create selector. This is like the hype. I have like 3 or 4 different versions of create selector, and in current solid we actually use or in 2.0 we actually use a slower version of create selector, which uses projections, but it's still faster than doing it naively. And the problem is we have this cleanup function. We have to be able to register stuff in the effect scope, like so when the computation reruns, it needs to clean up, and I couldn't find a single way to register cleanup yourself. Like obviously you can set up an effect scope, they have ownership and auto cleanup, but there's no way for the end user to register cleanup. So Alien Signals does have ownership, which is awesome. It's like very important concept. It's like the baseline that Surplus SJS introduced and what Solid is built on. The only thing is they haven't really exposed that capability to the developer. So I wasn't able to make this in user space. Whereas I was able to do it in Vue RxJS because their old reactivity didn't have an owner scope, and I actually just hacked my own owner scope in, and then basically handled the cleanup myself. Like you can take something like Alien, or I mean Alien's fine, but you can take a base reactive system with tracking and hack ownership in. That's how I've been building these demos over time. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's it for this segment with alien signals and view and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if anyone else has any questions about this, about the benchmarking or methodology here. I'm not going to submit this because honestly, I had to cut out a bunch of features to make it work, and then I'd be re-implementing them. And my gut is Vue Reactivity 3.6 will just take care of it for me. It will wrap alien signals and do all the stuff, which means that Vue RxJSX will continue to be good. I might be tempted to submit the signals version in though, because it's actually, it might give Vue Vapor a run for its money, and when they submit the alien signals version, it will also get faster in theory. So we could be in a world where we could see if DOM expressions versus Vue Vapor is faster. At a core, and that might be an interesting place where we can like see if there's trade-offs to the way that I built the renderer versus how Vue or Svelte did. Like this is the first time Svelte's a little bit more locked in, but Vue Vapor without the Vue part and DOM expressions are both, my understanding is like bring your own reactive library, right? And it's an imperfect thing. Like I was very tempted to just axe DOM expressions because I could build stuff more specific for Solid, but as I said, I basically built my own version of Vue Vapor like five years ago. So it's kind of cool thing just to have for experimentation like this. Anyway. Yeah, you can if you use the React. Okay, very brief thing. One way of doing the selector thing is using the reactive system. Like in a kind of normal way, you can kind of dynamically create the signals. Like you make your own signal projection. So like you can essentially, as you iterate through, you can just create signals. And again, I don't know if that's slower here. It might have been like I don't know if it's slower than just doing it naively, but you can make a signal for each row dynamically, and then basically use that to do the selection mechanism. What I did with Solid way back was I found a way that was faster, which was using maps, and then I'd keep references to the reading node, and I would call them. Most reactivity is like, we'll call you, essentially, like you'll schedule it and then they'll call you. I came up with this mechanism that reversed the flow of reactivity. So essentially, if you look at the code for the JS framework benchmark, and I'm not going to use Vue because of their templating language is not whatever. Or actually, I have to use Solid in this example to explain it, or the one we were working on, alien signals. Oh no, not that one. The other one, the Vue RxJSX. I just need to use one that uses the selector to show what I'm talking about. Yeah. Let me show you. What I was doing essentially is selected doesn't do a reactive read. It actually collects this computation, this effect or whatever this is. It collects the binding context, but it doesn't actually do create a dependency. So each row, when it gets created, actually and with this map set approach, doesn't create a signal, doesn't create a dependency. So the dependencies and stuff are empty. So it literally just passes right through without that overhead of creation. And then, I mean, there is an overhead because we do create the sets, and sets actually can be expensive, but a set is going to be cheaper than a signal because signal is like multiple objects. And then essentially, when the selector triggers, it uses that information where it like said the ID here and the computation it's associated with to just directly call those computations. So it bypasses the whole tracking system and reverses the flow. This was my first approach because it's very difficult to make projections and selections performant. And to this day, this is still the fastest approach I've come up with. But it's very specific. And what I've done since with 2.0 is generalize the approach to projections using stores, which will work for literally every problem of this nature, instead of this one, which really only works for selection and multi-selection. Because I'm not. It's a difference between me paying. I basically, if I went to 1080p on StreamYard, I'd have to pay like 4 times as much money. I know that's something, but I don't actually make money from streaming at basically all. YouTube changed the algorithm and stuff. Even though I charge stuff and have ads and I have Twitch, whatever, I make probably. I don't even get enough money to pay for my StreamYard off streaming. Uh, so yeah, also I'm not doing something right, but I that's not why I do things. I just okay. So let's talk deep, right? That's what I was prepping you guys for here. We're going to talk about deep. I think we're good on this stuff. There we are. We can close down. Why? There's something really weird going on where I can't like VS Code just doesn't want to shrink for me. Um, anyways, yeah, I don't think I'm even going to screenshot these results. I think they speak for themselves. I mean, we're not surprised. I know I make a big show of it and spend like 40 minutes building this thing, but we kind of knew the answer beforehand, even though I honestly, in truth, didn't know the answer completely. Like, I haven't done this before. It just, some things are kind of obvious. Okay, so let's look at deep. Yeah, view watchers deep, because see, they have some notes here. Let me blow this up. But they're like, I love views docs. Like, honestly, like, because they watch works directly on an effect. You can just pass a function, makes sense, and then new question, old question. Solid's new create a split effects basically would work like this. Actually, you know what? Before we do deep, I want to do one more thing. Let's pull up the HackMDs. Come on. Let's sign in with GitHub. They're going to be like a jerk here. It's funny they won't let me use my. I have like an authenticator, but they're instead going to text me. Okay. All right. Yeah, let's forget about SSR. I have 2 new things on SSR for now, but I want to talk before we talk about deep. I want to talk about split effects because, as I said, React has split effects, right? They have a depth array and they have thing. Vue started from this place of watchers. If you actually look at their code, when they go almost straight into here, and then later they're like, oh yeah, there's a watch effect somewhere down here, right? Oh, there it is. And guess what? You can do it all together. It's sometimes convenient. Oh no, it's not even watch effect. It's because watch effect is still like that. Or sorry, no, watch effect here. It's all one function. Yeah, right. Makes it a little bit more convenient. Blah blah blah. Both allows to react for side effects. Main difference is they watch reactive dependencies. Watch only tracks explicitly watch sources. It won't track anything else. Watch track on the hand combines dependency tracking and side effect when fades. It often tracks every reactive property. This is more convenient and typically results in terse code, but it makes reactive dependencies less explicit. I have to admit, early in one of the big changes I made a knockout at my company was I switched it all to, I called it sync, but I switched it to what we did all our effects with explicit dependencies, not our computeds, but all our effects, because it made the code way easier to trace. So we actually, my own wrapper on top of knockout that the company used and set as a standard, we used something like watch back in, like, as I said, 2014, 15 period. I'd had enough bad experiences with ping ponging reactivity. So like, this is not crazy to me that Vue kind of approaches it this way. React approaches it this way. Solid didn't. Um, because at a certain point I was just like, well, like in the JSX, it's going to be just all mixed. So let's just do it. And now with the new signals libraries, Vue adds watch effect, Ruins followed the suit. And I find myself in this really awkward place where I'm like, we actually should split them, right? And I did a whole stream about it. But then I got to this point where I was sitting there on break late at night and just going, people are just really going to hate this. Like, no matter what I do, people are going to really, really hate it. Like, the amount of people arguing against split effects on that one stream I did was immense. I spent like an hour and a half arguing with people about it. And it was just like, it's like one of those things that has to be. But so I was like, okay, can we just not split effects? Like, is this an option? Right? Right, and don't get me wrong, I'm in a boat where we probably we'll keep a watch effect too. I think it's more primary, like a views thing, though they have watch and then it's watch effect. I think it's more primary to be split than not split, but offering both probably is still reasonable. Except, yeah, this is where my thing goes. I'm like, is it okay to offer both? Right? I know I made a big thing about splitting effects the past few months. Sorry, did I copy the? I might have copied the wrong share link. Yeah, I copied the wrong share link. My bad. Let me put the right one on. Sorry. And you know what? It's completely the correct conclusion. Just like you shouldn't write to signals in pure computations, just like a whole bunch of other similar rules, the rules you follow the rules, you get great results. The React core team has a term for this. They call it falling into the pit of success. They are not the originator of this idea. I want to look into this a bit. Obviously, Jeff Atwood isn't even, but his blog from the mid 2000s is amazing. Just a side note, just some of the stuff, like streaming SSR, the Lost Art, also wrote that article. But basically, he's just talking about like the problem with C++ is it does a terrible job protecting you from your own worst enemy yourself. Like basically, you want developers who don't know what they're doing to kind of find success. If your software is too hard to use at a certain point, it's on you. That's basically like the gist of it, right? But if the React core team is guided so much by this principle, why do so many people have a hard time with creating performant and optimal React apps? Well, because even if it is one of success, you're still falling in a pit, right? I think this is kind of important fact. Like falling in falling to the pit of success is raising the floor. It's not. It doesn't have it has nothing to do with the ceiling or like. So in general, this is a good idea. If people find software too hard, it won't be very useful for them. However, what I've witnessed over the past few years is the rules can get so strict that people can't make sense of them anymore, right? Like there's one thing to love the Rust borrow checker, but there's another thing where because then you won't get in trouble. But then there's another thing where it's like you literally don't know how to write code anymore. React is optimal for a company with 1,000 developers where one code can't kill them. Well, yes, this is the pit of success, right? Because you have 1,000 developers, no one can. If everyone's just falling in a pit, they don't die, right? Right. Basically, they are pretty good at making sure that if you write some code, it will generally work. It does, but it says nothing of the quality of that code. The problem is over time. But the problem to get there, you have to follow rules. Is what I'm getting at. Like you have to be like the rules of React, whatever, because you can still break it. Like it's still possible to follow like for things to break. So you, in order to, they just set really they set guardrails, really high guardrails. But you still have to follow those guardrails. If you try and go around the guardrails, stuff still won't work. The guardrails just make sure that like you fall forward instead of falling backwards, right? And at a certain point, these kind of systems, I think, inevitably get to a point where the rules get so strict and so piled up that you're not talking about a pit anymore. You're talking about like a conveyor belt of success, so to speak. Like, and it's not like success in the good way, the success in the pit of success way. Like you're basically now kind of on rails to probably fall off. You just have, but you have no control of it anymore because like the walls are so freaking high on either side. So what I'm getting at, sometimes people want to do what intuitively makes sense, no matter how incorrect or detrimental it is. Ryan Florence was actually on Twitter. I wonder if I bookmarked it. Uh, Let me see if I bookmarked it. I didn't, but he was literally. Let's see if we can find it. Ryan Florence. He he was on Twitter complaining about React. Um, he posts too much for me to find it right away, but it was about Flush Sync. Um, it's funny, like if I go through my notifications, probably like far enough back, I'll find it. Uh, Sorry, like I have nothing important here. I don't care if you guys see this. Do. Ryan Florence. I wonder if I can just like type his name in here and get to it. Oh, doesn't help when we have same name. Like never gonna find it now. No, just never gonna find it. This is never gonna find it. Oh, it happens to me all the time. Anyways, he's complaining about Flush Sync, and he's like, I'm done with using tools like this where where like I can't make sense of it anymore. It's like it was like the perfect example for the point I'm trying to make, and it bugs me that I can't find it right now, because it had to do with the whole the synchronous execution thing. Yeah, it was like around this time, but it wasn't that response. Damn it! What I just it's like it deleted. Did he delete his tweet? It was definitely April 10th. This another like oh okay, there it is. Found it. Over a year later, I'm wondering why this is still so dang hard. I left Ember over the stuff. React is just as hard now. I'm ready for a client rendering model that balances these kind of tasks better instead of hyper focus on performance and pedantic stuff like idempotency. Yeah, Brian hates auto batching, which Solids hasn't to this date done. Right. And so does Dax. There's a lot of people who hate auto batching, and I don't blame them. It's one of those things where it's like, yes, it's the correct thing to do in most cases. But it's also like, I was trying to figure out what, like, is he okay writing Flush Sync, or does it like miss a gap for him? But you know, does he? Okay, let me see if is there a specific. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. So I did find it. Okay. So like I this mentality, like even with the someone as prolific in the React community as Ryan, you kind of feel it, you know. And this is what I'm trying to get at. So, like, even if I know that it's wrong, can we do this for people? I always hate when I make those compromises, but it is a question that I think is worth considering, because people want to be able to just write code and do stuff. Sometimes the guardrails, you know, the pit of success is just like it's great. Like it creates that beautiful system that works great for people. But sometimes it just like if they can't reason about what their code's doing anymore, you've also lost. You can't make the rules more complicated than the problem that they're trying to solve. So this troubles me. Right. I had this discussion also with someone in the web components, still replying months later on my web component thread, and they were talking about how they'd come up with this perfect system, blah blah blah, and they were like splitting client and server, kind of almost like some web components are server only, which is something I hadn't really thought about much. And then with client components, and I'm like, but then you're not SSRing the client components, and they're like, each has its side, yeah, but I'm like, effectively, the solution isn't like empirically as good. Like there's places, and he's like, yeah, but I get to skip all the complexity, and it's like I couldn't even explain. Like it got to a point, it was hard for me to explain just how much better the other solutions were on every vector because of the complexity of understanding all that goes into it, like to take the whole journey up. This guy, for his case, had found a good solution, so he should keep at it. Obviously, he was arguing to me like he'd solved the universe, and he clearly hadn't. But like, I think that it doesn't matter whether he hasn't or whether I understand how much better things could be if we can't cross that gap together. Yeah, but it becomes guardrails when you're like, as you keep on doing the tower up, like it should be defaults, but like maybe like React is such a good example, but just because how twisted the semantics are. I know it's funny because they call signals and us twisted, semantically, but React is just way left field compared to how a lot of people learn to program it. Like, don't get me wrong, people who learn functional programming first, like if your first programming language is Haskell, maybe elements of React or might make more sense than that. But most people learn really bad mutable imperative coding, and the React model is like flips it on its head. It convinces that hydration is a real problem. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. But we've probably bashed on web components enough this stream. I mean, it happens accidentally. It's too easy. But maybe we should be. I need to be more conscious of it. It's just like one of those things that just kind of accidentally happens. Um, so yeah, let's just talk about this a bit. We'll get into deep after this, but user effects don't participate in rendering, right? That's been the new revelation with 2.0 when I did this stream, is that we can make user effects independent of suspense and error boundaries. So we don't need to know their dependencies up ahead. So we can combine them, right? Transitions, all that fancy stuff, effects that like you writing to your third party program or whatever, writing some logs, don't need to worry about that. Sure, if things aren't mounted, they need to be held and all that kind of stuff, but generally speaking, you don't care about all this like split time garbage when you're writing your user effects. So why should I force you to care, right? Right. The trade-off here is with lazy computation, some pure nodes won't run during the pure phase as they won't be read until later. I don't know if you guys remember, I did an Excalibur a while ago. I don't even know if I have it in here anymore, but I was comparing the timing of execution. Yeah, it doesn't look like I have it in here. It was on my old computer. I was comparing the execution time of React and Solid and saying how if everything's lazy, you can run some nodes for the first time during the effect phase, or you can run some nodes in the pure phase. If you split the effects, you make sure the pure stuff always happens, all of it, before the effects. You can't accidentally perform some effect before reading something pure. So, like, again, Ryan Florence, I don't care about pedantic stuff like idempotency and you know what I mean. Like any like we know that when weird bugs appear and people are like, what's going on, we have to justify our position. It's way nicer to justify your position with like, look, this is a clear way of how this will always work. But the consequence of having a system that's explainable and follows rules is that you do care about crap like this. So like, like at one extreme, you have like for our current system, we have things like React. And then the other extreme, we have like Svelte 3. Svelte 3 was just like, whatever feels natural, it will get there. And the problem with that is that it had one of the least intuitive reactive systems ever. That's why like they were so stoked on changing it when they changed the ruins. Like Svelte 3 just sometimes just didn't work in a way that was like consistent, because it's like it was just like just let it slide, whatever's easiest, whatever's natural. These aren't extremes you can just choose. You end up almost always in the middle. Close your eyes and hear some use spelled, yeah. Right. But okay. With later copies, pure nodes won't run in the pure phase as they won't be read later, but you can use them to read from the DOM. You shouldn't really though, but pre-render measurement to post-render measurement is something we do like with flip animations. But you could make it work with like two types of effects, like a render for pre and a user for post, where a single split effect could do both. That's fine, assuming measurement guaranteed to run before render. I mention it because I recently hit an issue with the order reactivity tracking caused havoc on effect execution order because dependencies got read first higher up, causing that branch to notify and queue first, even though effects were declared in opposite order. So yeah, effect order is something you can't trust. So the scheduling of the pure before the effect actually safeguards you a little bit. But in general, we really shouldn't be relying on the order effects. You can rely on the front half running before the back, and the back of render before the back of the user effects, but that's about it. But with that enough rules, you probably could still do flip animations. So this isn't a deal breaker. It's just me kind of talking through it. The other thing to consider is render effects run both halves immediately initially, so refs from later aren't there. After initialization, the front half creates refs, so the back half of one declared earlier could conceivably get it. But that's no different than today, I suppose. It suggests that most element augmentation will happen in user effects, which is an interesting note. It means that like when you're like in user space adding stuff to the DOM, it's generally not going to be using a render effect, which is interesting because you think rendering was where you do that kind of stuff. It's just kind of understanding that. Explicit tracking with any depth feels awful. This is another thing. Now, a store only issue for most part, but it's real. If a signal holds an object or an array, it is understood the whole list needs to be swapped to trigger change. So this feels fine. But once it can be updated granularly, it's awkward. Like pushing an item or swapping an index won't trigger it. If it did, we'd never see the granular tracking. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, okay, if list is a signal, and sorry, this is just supposed to be a function. It looks like I'm like returning an object. Oh no, I guess that's not an object. That is a function. When you put braces, that's returning an object. Anyways, my point is, if this is a signal, the only way to update the signal is to replace the array. Like if this is a list. So if you have added something to the list, you actually have to immutably replace the list, and then you rerun the function. This is the truth of it. There's no way because it's immutable. Like a signal has a value, change value trigger. Now, if this is a store and someone updates a single property, you're not accessing that property there. If this was like, list 3, then yes, when list 3 changes, you'd expect this to run. But here, this is not access to property. In fact, if this is a store, this doesn't work. But if you wrapped it in a function and called, list, it basically would never update unless someone replaced the whole list. And when you're doing fine-grained updates, like pushing, it would not trigger. So the problem is you can't just assume deep, because if you assume like that, you can't just always notify deep. What I'm getting at is if someone is listening to 3 and someone pushes 5 on the end, you don't want this to trigger. You can't just assume that anyone who listens to this array wants to be notified when you push something to the end. So like it's tricky. You can't just come up with a single rule. You either over notify things that are only listening to specific indexes or specific properties and objects, or you'll under notify and just like not trigger anything. You have to you have to you have to opt into this behavior. So what did I say here? You wouldn't expect adding to the end of the array to trigger it. Yeah, okay. Now stores technically create separate signals to track the whole array, so they can have either behavior, but we can't assume it is top level in what we return from the front half, right? We don't know. Like, what if someone returns an array or an object array? You can't just assume what you get here is like what you want. What you want is what I'm getting at. It has to be explicit. Um, Stores for the most part aren't async. Is a good point. As except for getters, they aren't derived, and in that case, that isn't deep. One one thing that I kind of realized while working on it is like if stores aren't async, if you can have async projections, but then it's the source of the async is coming from how you're deriving it. So you can say like, hey, I'm reading this data and I'm projecting out this thing. And in that case, every property of the projection is tied to that asynchronicity. So it's not like, as you're exploring through the depth of the store, you're going to suddenly hit something randomly async. It's either going to be able to process the store on a whole or not, based on whether it depends on something async. So from that side, there is a saving grace that just like kind of an aside, that if we did have a combined effect, it's the first property you accessed on that projection is going to cause it to throw. You don't have to worry about getting like 90% through the process and then suddenly hitting something async. This is an argument for why stores probably aren't, or projections aren't, an argument against split effects. Sorry, just a tangent, but it's just that generally speaking, the whole thing triggers async or the whole thing doesn't. It's not a granular consideration. Yeah, I mean that's how the solution ends up working in the end. But from the end user perspective, it's colorless. So like if you split effects, you never have to witness the color. When you put them together, you suddenly get this, like, write something that you think is synchronous, and then it suddenly behaves differently. You get this mess. Is kind of the problem. Anyway, so deep signal bags are the only place where async gets us in trouble. Reading at the top of effect probably is reasonable enough advice. Picture deep traversal async airing out midway is probably pretty pessimistic. More than likely, it throws async immediately. So what I'm saying is, if people, when they wrote their combined non-split effects, just accessed all the variables at the top, even if it just means accessing the first property of the store or projection, they're probably not going to run into trouble, right? That's sort of what I'm arguing here, right? I I think it's possible that I might have overstated that people would get in trouble. Like I think that generally speaking, you know, so far both of these arguments are saying like it's better to use split effects, but it's probably fine. You know, I mean, this is kind of a pain. So why wouldn't you just use a joined effect in this case, right? Because the only way to solve this is deep. You need deep, and it needs to be explicit. It can't be automatic. So you're forcing another API to do this with split effects, where it just works automatically with joined effects. Error handling plus async throwing is awkward. Okay. Once you split things, you need to consider source errors different than effect errors. Yes. Not that combining them is great either, right? Yeah. So what I was saying is once you split them, there's a difference between this side erroring, because let's say it's not available, or you have the async data that's aired out, and your effect erroring. Whereas when it's together, they all kind of bungle together and you just handle the error yourself. The problem is if async throws promises effectively, like React, you can't just use normal try catch in your effects if they're joined. If they're split, you know that it's only going to throw async on the left side, and the right side is normal code, exactly how you expect it. But if you combine it, now you have to be aware that async can be thrown in the middle of your like random code that has no idea about the reactivity system. We have a try catch helper, kind of like the one that Theo proposed on stream. It's kind of funny. He's like, I always use this thing. And I was like, that's funny. I actually added that to Solid 2.0 a few weeks ago. But there's this tension, right? that async brings to surface. If you view your effects as oblivious to reactivity, right, which is probably why you want to combine them. You have stores with properties that you access, and just like pretend it's a normal JavaScript object when you use a third-party thing. Like, if you view your effect as oblivious to reactivity, you would normally be able to use try catch in your code, right? Right. But like, it works with split effects because the reactivity is stripped, right? But if you're conscious of reactivity, then all the effect code becomes part of the system. You can't arbitrarily expect third party code to work. Like, there's this real awkwardness. Like, the reason that people want to just jam it all together and pass stores into random processes that don't know about reactivity is so that they can just accept normal objects and pretend like there's no reactive system. But then normal things like try catch won't work in there, so that's broken. But on the flip side, if you split it out and make it clean, then you have to know the reactivities there. You have to like go through the effort of doing deep or like tracing the path you want ahead of time before letting it work. The thing is, when you split, you truly have an outside of the system that works exactly without any weirdness, like as native JavaScript works. So there's like no winning here. It's like the argument you make to combine them in terms of these deep stores is the same argument that basically cancels it from an async standpoint. Deeply nested reactivity blurs the line, and you kind of want it to, but it also doesn't work. So tricky. Okay. And this kind of brought me to my fourth point. I hope you guys are following so far. It's that combined effects want to tear, probably. It feels less disruptive to have an effect trigger and bail out every time something is loading. So this is an important point to make. And maybe this changes a bit in the future, but the changing of the loading state is something that triggers things to rerun on the pure side, because some things might be observing the fact that it's loading, which means that new async is going to trigger like when we are tearing, we don't care about loading and we bypass it, so loading states don't affect it. But when we're not tearing, every time something goes to loading, we have to retrigger the effect, right? Because then that thing can't process, and we have to notify, because we need to, some new reactivity that comes in has to be able to know, hey, I should block. We have to get all the way to the leaf so that something listening at the bottom. So we basically are stuck in this really awkward place where I showed this example before where I was like, oh, we don't know what order A, B, or C runs. But when you consider the loading triggering timing after initial run, it's not just like the 5 combinations I talked about. You might see like A, B, B. Like, you might just see like things popping in like even crazier orders if you don't do tearing. If you do tearing, at least you know that like it'll always get the previous value and you can kind of predict it a bit. Like, once you get past that initial like, oh, this might step down, you can basically just say it's always the latest thing. But if you didn't make it tear, which is what my default was, and which is what I was aiming for, this is even worse than what I said in the past. Well, that's what we do right now. We only queue. Well, the problem is that's a chicken and egg, right? Right now with split effects, you only run the effect when the async is resolved. It doesn't tear, because it doesn't matter how many times the front half runs. The back half only runs when it resolves, and you know this because you have the dependencies up front. But here, you can't only queue effects when async resolves unless it's like all async, because you can't know what this effect needs until you actually run it. Right? Like, you can't make that determination because it's the running of the effect in this combined state that actually tells you what it depends on. So like this isn't just the problem with the order of A to B, C console log or what side effects gets run to it, but unnecessary work as things come in and out of sync. Yeah, like, what if each of these console logs is actually side effects? Sure, you can properly write it with cleanup, but you might recreate and break down the side effect like multiple times, not just in the chain of its order, but multiple times because of the loading state of something else loading causing it to do that. Like, it just creates a whole bunch of work. Don't queue if a loading goes if a known dependency goes to loading. Do, 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 do. Yeah, I mean that would reduce the numbers. Like because but again, it's very specific because now you'd have to like know what type of read or like what type of dependency is being tracked for this. No, I get what you, and to be fair, tearing is what I'm talking about. Tearing is it just always reads the previous value, um, unless there's a new depth. So I mean, what you're describing is not that much different than tearing, other than it doesn't actually tear, which is kind of cool. It's just very specific. It's still a mess, though. I guess there is a world where that's solvable. I'll grant you that. So after the initial load, the situation in the log gets worse. What if A is resolved and we trigger B? A might run 2 more times. This is an argument for keeping unrelated effects separate for sure. But what I'm getting at is even if they aren't completely unrelated, your conditional effects might execute in more ways than you expect. Yeah. There was an exercise that I did in the Solid Discord like a month ago, so I'm not going to be able to dig it up, where someone gave me a really complicated set of conditionals and asked me to how to write it, and it took me a minute or two to figure out how to break it into like 3 separate effects. Um, because what you want to do with conditionals is isolate the effect and the cause with split effects. It works way better that way, and then each expression is shortcuttable. Um, but a lot of people don't write their logic that way. They don't think that way. It was like that Dan Abramoff response to my signals thing, where he was like showing like this imperative logic, where he was like updating something in a for loop in the middle of a component, and I was like, that's just dumb. Just write it declaratively, and everything works better. That was an easy thing for me to in the situation to write. It just was a little bit verbose. This one actually took me thinking, and I don't think developers necessarily think in that way. Even though if the final code will be cleaner and runs more effectively, it's like it's like how people have a hard time writing like state machines, like with their logic, because it's a lot easier for people to see like if this then this, and like seeing like an imperative chain than just being like these are the rules. If you can set up the rules though, um, it's very 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 powerful. But yeah, it's kind of a mess. So yeah, this is a mess. Even reviewing this, it's way clearer to view stuff as an inside outside the reactive system. But granular effect is a superpower overlapping stuff allows. But maybe this is a superpower that should only exist inside. As hard as I try to make the argument, combined effects really just are a negative. Not even considering how split effects do things like forcing right after purity, clarify the stale cleanup problem. And if resumability is ever a thing you want, split effects can run the depths on the server without even running the effect. So like these are all things that split effects do uniquely. I was hoping this exploration would give us room to keep create effect as is and introduce split effects as a different primitive. We could still do that, but it's pretty hard not to slap a big deprecated label on this one. It just isn't good. If split effects are clearly the way to go, I need to come up with a reasonable solution for nested reactivity. I will explore that next. Yes, they definitely have this additional mental overhead. There is no arguing that point, which is why I like wrote this whole mess of a thing, because I agree. The problem is the alternative is horrendous. Yeah, sure. I will bite. Like this is why. Yeah, okay, because you guys are talking about the teardown problem. This is another thing that's solved automatically by split effects. Yeah, there is clearly. For us, the main reason I add front would be the explicit, which is I probably think they're misguided to do so, but I'm just some guy. Yeah, no. Yeah. Yeah, but it's the not simple cases. Stores are really an important thing, and nested reactivity is our superpower. It's like the thing that's unique about these solutions over React. If we were only using signals and no stores, uh, you could definitely use something like React. I agree with Rich in terms of like it's harder, and it's like this problem. This is why I was talking about this. It's like often with React, you get there and you're like, man, it's the right solution, but like no one's gonna like this. There is this additional, like, especially with deep tracking, that's where the thing is. So that brings us to the next topic, which is like, okay, if we're gonna solve this, like, obviously, if we split effects, we don't have to worry about this. We don't have to worry about this. This is fine. Literally, this is the biggest thing against split effects. Explicit tracking with any depth feels freaking awful. Okay, now I'm not gonna. Can we make this any less awful? That's part of the problem, and this gets us all the way to like the view watch, because I went there and deep watchers. When you watch directly on a React object, it will implicitly create a deep watcher. Oh, so that's cool. So they know that when you pass a store directly in, that they automatically do it because they support both a function and non-function form. I never thought about doing it this way, but so because there's implications, but the thing is, this won't. In this case, the callback will only fire if it returns a different object, right? Which is the situation that we're in. Basically, if some object swaps, then it updates. But if you go some object dot property equals 5, this is not going to fire. However, you can force a second option by doing a deep true, right? So that's used with caution. Deep requires traversing all necessary properties with watched objects and can be expensive when using large data structures. Use it only when necessary and beware of performance implications. Right? So I was like, okay, how terrible is deep? How is it terrible? How terrible is it? So I went in and I grabbed view reactivity and I created a data structure with 15 properties in an array of 100 objects, and each property has an object in it, which has an object with 15 properties, there's an object and saying to a depth of 4. And this data, this construct, via my arrays and char code and all this, because they're all ABC, whatever, took about 86 milliseconds. And then when I fed it into a watch expression, and for this one, I didn't realize I could have just done, I didn't need this deep true, Vue automatically hands it, but I set it for immediate. So because they're lazy by default, I think they're watching, and flush sync so that I could like time it. We basically see the situation where it takes 86 milliseconds to make, but to deep track this object on creation and update takes about 2400 milliseconds, so about 2.4 seconds to deep track. So yes, that if you understand, or 2.5 this run around, if you understand what this means, is it means if you came across this object, and this is an absurdly large object, don't get me wrong, but if you came across this object and you created it, it would take this long, and then every time you update it, like someone like updating this one properly, A, B, C, Z, doing these like fine grained little updates, it's taking 2.5 seconds to upgrade. Like, this is absurd. Obviously, this was not designed to handle such a large object. But so I mean, we could move like, what's more reasonable amount of data? We can move a layer off, so maybe 3. 150 milliseconds, 150. I mean, that's still locking 10 frames of FPS per change. I'm going to go with this as kind of like, really, as I said, use with caution. So I was like, and there's an option with Vue. I think they said that you can say how deep you want to. How deep you want to go with Vue. Deep option can be a number indicating the max level of traversal. So you can optimize it like this. And I was like, Man, that might be actually the thing that I'm most afraid of. If we get to a point where people are like trying to like think of optimizations for this, like, oh, I only need to listen like one level, or two, like kind of implicit untracking. I was just like, okay, this is awkward. This is definitely awkward. So um I started trying to like brainstorm what I could do. So as often, would you be surprised? Like most things, there's a solid primitives for this already. Somebody else in the community has already done this. So, as I said, that's the thing I love with Solid. You just have a library or an idea you want to do, and someone's already made it for you. Great ecosystem. Sorry, I'm being a bit facetious. Um, People always make fun of our ecosystem, but the truth of the matter is, like, the number of times that I find stuff that I'm looking for is surprising. Um, Anyways, the deep they have track deep, track store, and capture store updates. So track deep reading this is basically just a really dumb way, like naive way. They just iterate over through every single property to make it work. So I took the same test and I was like, okay, let's do this with Solid, right? And let's go here and let's do track deep. Okay, give it a second. And I'll refresh this so we can get the fresh things. And with track deep, wait for it. It takes a couple seconds, right? It was the update is about 2,500 again, and the init is about 2,900. It's actually a little bit longer. Uh, it looks like, but it's basically the same numbers I got from Vue. So that gives me a hint at how Vue is handling it. Is basically the naive traversal. You just go through, check everything, walk through all the properties, and track it. So that's not great. Obviously, with smaller data, we can downscale this, like we saw with Vue, down to 100 milliseconds, but that's too much. Let's keep the giant data structure. So when I went into solid primitives, someone in the community, they'd solved something called track store, a much more performant alternate track deep that is utilizing memorization and specific store in place of solid stores. You should consider this instead of other track methods for large stores to update rapidly or track many effects. So what they're leveraging is, the way we have a way that we can trigger arrays. I mentioned it earlier, without on like index change or whatever, without tracking length. Sometimes, like, I realize that sometimes you want to do it. So every proxy in solid stores has an optional, again, only if you use it, additional signal. So every object array has an additional signal. And if it exists, when we update the property, we'll update the object and notify it. Only things that listen to track, like and it's a shallow one depth track, are basically arrays and stuff like our control flow components. You'll see $ track being used. But these guys were like, well, what if we just track all the way up? So instead of our data structure having, like, if you look at this data structure that I was making here, this naive one where it's 15 properties and then 100 and then depth 4, like it's like let's get a calculator. So it's like 15. Where's scientific? 15 to the 4th times 100. Yeah. So the naive version here is creating 5 million signals and creating 5 million subscriptions. What if instead of doing that, we basically only tracked at the per object level, essentially, so that the last object doesn't care about those properties. It's the last layer. So we're already 15 to the 3. And yeah, so in a sense, it's not much of a fix. But if you think about it, it turns it into 15 to the 3 times 100. which is only 330,000 subscriptions and signals, which is a definite improvement here, and sizable one. So let's switch to this one. I'm going to comment out that one and just do this. And you can get this today in solid primitives. And what you're going to see here is that deep structure now is taking 152 milliseconds to update and 275 milliseconds to create. So it's almost it's basically 10 times faster on creation and 20 times faster on an update. So, you know, again, if we made the numbers like a little bit smaller or more realistic or more of that, now, you know, this example where even when we made it smaller in the view example here, where we're like, oh, it's 158 and 172, at least with this approach, it's only about 10 milliseconds to update when we shrink the data down. So this might be acceptable, and you can get that today. But I wasn't satisfied. Right? Like, if you give them this API, people are going to do dumb stuff. And I would love to actually be able to give them the API without the warning. Right? 10 milliseconds an update is too close to 60 milliseconds. Like, you won't get 60 frames per second here. Right? And I'm like, these guys figured this out, the solid primitive guys, in third-party user land, which is freaking amazing. Can I do something better core? So let's go back to our giant data, right? Because what bugs me about this is creation takes 87. We're okay if that happens, but it's weird that the update is more than the creation, you know, in the init every time. Is there a way that we can do better? And I came up with a deep helper in Solid 2.0 that I think does just that, where the initialization time is close to the data creation time. This has been jumping around, but then the update time is 0. What? 0? That can't be right. No, it's definitely calling update. Sorry, sometimes the console logs get thing like that. O to 1 is from the effect. They get squashed sometimes in here. Let's run it again. Oh, it's 0.2. Basically less than a millisecond. And the reason why this approach is so fast is because it creates only one signal and only one subscription instead of 300,000 or 5 million. So how did we do this, right? Because this isn't even the small data set. This is the giant data set. If we go back to like, oh, maybe this is more reasonable, we get a situation where the initialization takes about 5 milliseconds, and I think again about the same cost as creating the data, and the update again is still about 0, right? So it's basically, it's not per store, because if per store could over notify. You have to start thinking about how to solve this problem, right? If you're not going to traverse, the challenge is the only way to not create a billion signals is to say, in the same way we create one signal for track, I added a $deep signal. So it's at the level, the thing you pass to deep right here. That store, that's top level store. If I went store.data or store.data.a, whatever I pass to it, every node in the store has the potential to have a deep signal, just like it has the shallow track signal. So that part's straightforward. The way we solve this is that when any store gets written to down here, we walk up to parents and check if there's any deep signal, and if there are, we notify. Simple. right? Well, not really. It can be simple, but there are some challenges here, right? There's a reason why there's still a creation cost. When I was in the process, the real breakthrough came for me was actually thanks to some of you might know him, Fabio, who works on um, Vobi or Bobby. I don't know how to say it. Um, Member of our community, always quick to point out. No, give him a shout out properly. Quick to point out performance issues in Solid and how we mess everything up. But framework author, 900 stars on GitHub, so this is legit. It's another reactive framework, similar to Solid. Works similar to Solid. Yeah, great. No VDOM. Blah 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 blah. It's just lighter. It's I don't know if it's necessarily lighter weight. He basically doesn't do the JSX transform. That's like the claim to fame, and his API is slightly different. But he's been doing a lot of the similar work, and he had solved this problem because I was already thinking doing this parent thing, but there was kind of trade-offs because okay, let's say you have a weak map where whenever every child back references its parents. See, when you have a proxy and you get up here, how do you know who the parent is, right? Yes, this approach works like that. Yes, because because you put the watcher at 0 0. So then if 0 0 dot a gets updated, or ad or let's put more arrays like 1 2 3 4 5 6 all the way whatever down, it walks up the parents until it gets to that node at 0 0 and updates. Yeah, both is solid age function. Yeah, but built around that use case much better, like better than our version, admittedly. um so where I was sitting at is like I realized when I was working with Tanner, I was like, Tanner, I solved this like over a year or two. I'm like, I can use weak maps to backtrace the parents, because like the first thought you have here is, what if you use the writing path, right? But like the access path on right, because you can go S data 55 A B Z equals 2, then like, because B came from A and A came from 55 and came from data and came from this, you could trace back and see if any of these have deep on it, you can fire. That's actually incredibly fast. The challenge is, what if your object's in multiple locations? This is the difference between like Redux and a reactive nested state, is that Redux, and I was lamenting over this a lot when I was doing like diffing with stuff, is every time you update part of the store, you clone the whole freaking thing. You not every object in it, but you clone everything along the path. And if something's referenced in two different locations, well, unless you also go and update the reference in that other location, it stays the old one, and now you have the new one in the new location. Whereas in a reactive store, if you update the object in one place, it updates in the other place automatically. That's expectation. So the problem is, if you have something in two places and you initialize the store or do something way, or you don't walk all the way deep into it, you might update something in one location that you've never traversed before in a different location, and then that wouldn't update. Solid signals. Let me see if I can open this up. Let me go in here. Sorry, actually, the tests are probably the most indicative thing here. Store. Um, no, when I'm testing deep, right? Oh, did I not commit it up? No, I did a release. I did a release. It should be in store.t. Oh, it's in utilities test. That's my bad. Yeah, sorry. This is where it is. I can like show this an example of this, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. XDeep updates. Where is the setup here? Yeah, see, create store, first nested shared reference. So I have this thing, shared reference, in these two different locations, right? First nested shared, second nested shared. If I create an effect that deeps on first, and then I write on second, how would these ever know about each other? Because you can think about it. If you've never linked, like you initialize it like this, you would never have linked up this tree. You have to traverse all the properties to create the backlinks to the parents. And I don't want to do that, generally speaking, on creation. It's one of the performance overheads that we were doing a VDOM UI bench a few weeks back. I was talking about how I'd come up with a new diffing, immutable diffing under the hood approach. We were doing unwrapping eagerly in Solid 1.0, and it was tanking our performance. It's funny, pre 1.0 we were really fast, and then around 1.0 we got slower on diffing. I fixed the diffing problem by not walking through everything. So we don't want to walk through everything on creation to create these backlinks. We're not doing it already anymore. That was one of the big updates that I'd made. But we need to create it. So how do you solve this? Well, because if you look at it, if you go deep store first here, you're starting here. You're not like, they're not related. They're not sharing part of the tree, right? So how do you get these to notify? And what I ended up doing was, even though we don't create async, or sorry, we don't create signals and subscriptions all the way up. We do, when we call deep, traverse all the nodes to create the backlink of the parents, which was, expensive. It's not nearly as expensive as any of the other solutions that we looked at so far today. But like when let's go back to 4 here. It was around 90, or it was still expensive for creation, but the same cost as it costs to create the data in the first place, which I think is an acceptable metric. The problem was, then every single time when I came up with a solution, I was like, it was faster because basically every single time users not using this feature were not impacted, but every single time we update the effect called deep, it would essentially run this again originally, because it would basically retrack, because it's like, look, something could have changed. I need to relink up with all the parents again. I don't know what could have changed. And that meant that while it was a significant improvement, updates were still, in this extreme case, about 90, which is not acceptable. Obviously, again, if we go down to like 3, updates being 5 milliseconds is arguably okay, but I didn't like this. And Fabio came in and he's like, look, my updates and creates are 0. It's like, what? Well, he didn't solve the path problem. He did something smarter than track the writes. What he did was, he's like, if anyone anywhere ever accesses the store along that path, we'll register it with the weak map. So he did at least handle the case, as long as you like access first somewhere, like access like this somewhere else, and there it will know. But if you haven't discovered it first or whatever, it's not going to trigger, which he felt was a reasonable trade-off. What I ended up doing to solve this was combine both approaches. And the way I did that was, initially on creation, go, again, not for all stores, just things that do deep, do the traversal. But write a shortcut in the traversal that if it ever ran again and it hit something that had been processed, it just skips. So that's why after the fact, it knows it doesn't have to run that pull traversal. It just stops. That's why it's 0. But then you're like, what if stuff's changed? What if there's new hidden deep properties you don't know about? Well, what I did, which I wouldn't have done as a generally speaking, but because you don't want to make write expensive. When people write objects, you don't want to go be doing the traversal either. That's, again, one of those performance optimizations I did. Well, what I did was, when you go to write, it walks up and notifies deep, right? If it finds something, then it goes and goes, okay, well then I'm actually going to go and build the parents for the children of this value that I'm building. But if it doesn't find anyone, it doesn't bother. So basically only users of this feature are impacted by the overhead of using deep. But in a case like this, the initial setup is expensive because the data was big. And the write is cheap because you're only setting two. Now, if we were setting an object, maybe is slightly more expensive. If you're setting giant objects every frame, yes, then you would be back to paying similar to this initial costs. But my assumption is with deep is that you're not like if you're at a point where you want to track everything in here, deep, and you want to replace everything every frame, then why the hell are you using stores? Like it's the reason you want deep is there's like a discontinuity, right? Like there's like you're doing really granular updates, but they could be anywhere, right? Like or like it's the impedance mismatch. It's not like because if you're doing big updates and you're doing big tracking, use a signal. So anyway, the end result. I mean, I'll leave this up to the reader, so to speak. Is you can basically decide. Like Voby's approach is smart in that it's almost always zero, but it only works if you've actually traversed the path. This always works at the small cost of like a slight initialization. It's already significantly faster than the other approaches, even before you add these kind of optimizations. And I think, as I said, most people like even this object that we're using in this version here, um, where it's taking 5 milliseconds and basically instant updates. If I pull out our calculator here, um, yeah, it's actually this case. Um, it's still an object that contains 337,000 properties. I think most people using deep, like even that is a stretch. Like maybe. And in this scenario, we're talking about sub 1 millisecond updates. Well, I mean sub tenth of a millisecond, but we're talking about nothing is that expensive. That being said, in this scenario, track store is not that expensive either. It's like 3 milliseconds, and but naive is still expensive. It still won't get you 60 frames per second. So you can argue that the worth of this optimization over the track over the middle ground might not be worth it, but in theory, I could sleep comfortably knowing that if people do really dumb stuff, um, the performance will never get that bad. Oh, yeah, but only the types of if something listens to it deeply, yes, they will be slightly slower, but only for the types of writes. It's based on the size of the object that you're writing. So if you're, it's like if you're replacing the whole array of objects with new objects. Like if they're existing objects, not expensive because it shortcuts. It's literally if you're like creating new data every um every on the update after that frame. But yeah, it's basically only impacts people who use the feature essentially, and portions of the store. Like you're not going to like basically the overhead that you hit is the overhead that you see from the second number here, the update number. So like in this case here, it's this the overhead is this 0.01 or whatever. Like it's not the expensive overhead, it's the cheaper overhead, so to speak. But yes. All right. Anyways, Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's just gonna be the numbers in burst, right? How do I do that? Yeah, yeah. So create store like this, and then s dot data equals data. Yeah. See, the numbers have reversed now. Uh, this was the worst case, right? This the 3 or the 4? This is the 3. Yeah. So now the init is 0 and the update is 5 milliseconds. So if you're adding what was this one? 337,000 prop object, like nested prop objects. It takes 5 milliseconds to update. Yeah. So it's basically just the inverse thing. Um, as I said, maybe this trade off's not worth it. Maybe we should always be 0 and just expect things that people haven't traversed to, um, not to not to notify. But I think this is the fact that this always works, is pretty beneficial. Yeah. And it's, as I said, it's like what, like 30, more than that. It's like 40 times faster, even on the worst case, than the naive approach that you would just do yourself, or like what ships with Vue or whatever. So I mean, no one should be probably doing something crazy like this. As I said, if you're swapping this, like if this was your thing, you should be using a signal, right? Like if you wanted to deep track it, I mean, there might be a scenario, but like if this was what you were doing, like you're like, yeah. Anyway, okay. I think I've got 2 more hack MDs, but I'm not going to do those today. I think we're good to wrap up with a little This Week in JavaScript, which will not probably be terribly long because I have not been keeping up on it, but there's a couple topics. So let me quickly get myself ready for that, and give everyone a chance to take a quick drink of water, myself included. Wake up, shake those arms, see if you guys are still alive, right? I probably lost a lot of you. I apologize. Is anyone watching on Twitch anymore? 25 people. All right, let me get quickly set up here for This Week in JavaScript. As I said, I haven't been on top of things, so if you guys might have topics that I'm not familiar with. So let me see here. I went on break March. Yeah, I had a baby who arrived 9 days early, so I was kind of caught off guard. So essentially, the timing, is a little bit. Sorry, just bookmarks. All right, we got to go back to. Sorry, there we go. March. All right, and then finally, solid. All right, here we go. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the congrats on the baby. Yeah. Yeah. It was. I was like, what? Like we were ready, but like it was also like sudden. So at the same time, it's like I wasn't like as prepared for like work stuff. I kind of just like dropped work immediately, Anyways, let's talk about this week in JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to start as I usually do with a little bit of solid updates because you got this is your chance to see some of that. Let me see here. Just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. First thing, all the big news coming off our last stream, as you know, TanStack stuff. Jack Harrington took basically no time getting the TanStack CLI working with SolidJS. So he's like, want to try out SolidJS in your app, but don't want to rewrite everything? Module Federation has you covered, and the Create TS Router app starter for Module Federation makes it easier ever. So basically, he's basically created your migration kit. He's like, you can basically start a project that's written in TanStack in React and TanStack in Solid simultaneously and have them sit right next to each other so you can migrate your stuff across with the same APIs, the same, the same features. You get to use TanStack, query, TanStack, router, all the good stuff. And you can literally just have your existing app and your new app, like literally like just sitting next to each other, all working together. But yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not a fan. You guys all know that. So it's like a necessary evil sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, if you can use it and then get rid of it, then it's worth it. That's kind of the problem with web components, right? You go, oh, they're a great migration tool. I'm not tied to any specific framework. I can have all 10 on the same page, and then you'll never get rid of the web components, right? That's the sorry. I'm dissing Red. Why is it so easy to diss web components? Like, I'm sorry. Okay. You probably call it stores 2.0. Yeah, I mean, I have so much more. There's so many cool things on the stores, but yeah, this is yeah. There's so much cool stuff. Anyways, let's keep on going. Sorry, yeah, we covered this last stream, right? That cursors written in Solid. I actually had like Misco reach out to me from Quick, and he was like, I was talking to the cursor guys. They want help debugging a problem. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I just didn't realize people talk about AI and React is so dominant in that field. To find the tools that people use actually written in Solid is it's funny because people are like, I won't use Solid because AI isn't good at generating solid code. I hear those complaints these days. It's kind of like it's done. Everyone's staying React ever, and yet the people making the AI IDE are using Solid. I don't know. Maybe that says something about the developer, not. Yeah. Anyway, we did talk about alien signals the first hour and a bit of the stream. This is like Remix flaunting ChatGPT using them. You should do more of that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this month in Solid, Daniel's always on point. What else do I got here? You can now build your Solid app with Turbo. You can install it with Tailwind. Yeah. I just love seeing like this is a Vercel setup. Like I love seeing these like pre-made templates. It's just getting easier to build this stuff. What's this? Fastest framework now with the quickest database. That works for me. I don't know much about this, but Triplet, the full stack database. Is this another one of those like sync things? Triplet. How do you spell it? Triplet. Full stack database. Yeah, sync one. Yeah, it's a sync engine. Well, I mean, sync engines like us, and for good reason. I said this, the store stuff that I was showing off today, when you can like, there's so many elements that, in terms of like diffing and projections, that yeah, it's so funny when I like the crate selector thing. For the Evan call it or whatever. In like a year, it's gonna look like the silliest thing, like because like literally where the whole everything is going. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. There's that call out again. Yeah. See, I know stuff's been going on in the community. I'm sorry, I just haven't been able to keep on top of it. It's my fault. I do the Twitter and David does the Blue Sky for Solid, and I have not kept up. So let's switch around. Okay. Okay, yeah. First of all, Beat documentary. I am stoked about this one. And yes, I've been in a lot of these, obviously, but this trailer is one of my favorite trailers for them, and just the crew of people, and just like it's I there's some jokes about, I'm actually narrating the clip. I didn't realize that they kept on putting pieces that I was talking about in between the other people talking, even though when actually said what I said, I wasn't actually narrating it. It just they kept on putting my sound bits in between the other quotes, which is worked really cool thing. But I can't wait for this to come out. Beat is so vital and important. And Comp is live this year, and yeah, I mean, I got invited. I don't know if I can make it, but I really hope I can. I if not, there'll be solid representation. I will, worst comes to worst, record a video, but I am very stoked to there. Yeah, everything up would be. I'm the historian. Yeah, Valabot V1. Awesome work, Fabian. I I mean, it's funny because this is kind of like the RS pack thing. I think that when faster solutions come out, we should give them proper respect to kind of figure out space. The challenge with Beat is it's like the meta framework. It's like the layer on point, and it doesn't care what's underneath. It's like building up this whole stack of things. Maybe now that it's Void Zero, there's actually going to be like battle because the lines will actually be drawn. But like previously, Veek was in a position where like they're like, we'll just use whatever's fastest or whatever's best, which makes it kind of difficult to compare it to any other specific bundler technology and stuff like the environment API and all this. It's cool if others are saying like, I can make this but smaller, but um, yeah, I mean, there will be a tipping point probably, but right now, this is mentioning Valibot because Zod is an example of this. This is 1 kilobyte to Zod's 15 kilobytes. This means that this sort of schema validation on the client is actually viable. I would never bring Zod into the client. It's crazy. I like 15 kilobytes is, like one of my GraphQL user, but like 1 kilobyte is definitely something. And Fabian did an incredible job to keep the thing small. I still don't know if I'd bring validation onto the client, to be fair, but if I were to, this is how I would do it. As I said, he's done amazing work over the year, and I'm so excited for him to hit his version 1 release. This is really quite an achievement in terms of improving the status quo, and that's what I was saying, like with the RS pack thing. Like it's if there's always going to be tools that push the boundaries a little bit. Like, and to be fair, like some people might view Solid like that for Vue or Svelte now. Some people thought we were that for React, but like where we push the ideas and drive it, and then bigger, more popular solutions kind of adopt it. But like we didn't start our life as something which was a better version of something else. We built and carved out a new space, and I think that's what probably makes Solid a little bit different. It's harder when it's like X but in Rust, or you know what I mean. That's like a different kind of thing where you know yeah, I guess there's a difference there. Zod Mini is 3 kilobytes, only 3 times bigger. But yeah, I mean, this is what happens. Like this kind of improvement, like 15x or whatever in size, happens by a major architectural shift, and then if given enough time, others will copy it and latch on, right? But it took someone actually doing it. This isn't, I do get that like our like switching something to say Rust or something like that is like 70x faster kind of situation, but it's like it's hard when there's so much competition. At least in his case, Valibot kind of came out and that was their unique thing, and it's only really Zod that you have to consider, right? Yeah, I started the stream earlier today. Alien Signals was like the first 2 hours. I'm actually like in the. This is like my new 5 o'clock sort of thing. I'm this is the last. We're kind of winding down here. We're doing this week in JavaScript right now. What I got here? Nobody got this. It's fine. I didn't expect anyone to. This is just for you guys' reference. This is a California poppy. It's a flower that grows where I live in San Jose. This is we're moving to Oregon actually, so this is probably the last year that I'll be seeing this regularly. But it always blooms at like the end of March and the beginning of April, and which timing wise is significant to me, especially because my son who passed away, his favorite color was orange, and he loved flowers and gardening, and this is just kind of like an remembrance kind of thing, which I talked about here. So yeah, a lot happened in the past month or so, but that's essentially the gist of it. I see I saw this flower last year right after the events, and then I saw it again this year, and it's kind of like symbolic for me now. Kind of like I know the red poppies are the sign of remembrance for like Flanders Field and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, what's this? The honey pot guys rebranded, and they re-merged because like I don't know if you guys know, these documentaries are like they all feel the same, but they were actually one company that split into two companies and now have apparently remerged back into a single company. It's kind of interesting because I've been along the journey for them this whole way. But yeah, so uh, yeah, JS Nation in the US, in New York, I'm speaking at, and I will be there. So, yeah, I've done a lot of European conferences over time, and now with young baby and stuff, I don't want to travel as much. I'm I'm very happy to be able to speak at some US conferences. I've always had a harder time getting into them. So, yeah, if you're in the US, in the East Coast, New York, next, was it November? Yeah, I'll be there. Oh, you're working on the custom render stuff, like the universal. I'm not gonna lie, that's like 90% copied from Vue. Vue's custom render was like I was just like, what should a custom renderer be? And then I just like looked at Vue, and then I kind of took their concept and then applied our fine grain like rendering, like the uh I mean, it is like Vapor. Like Vue didn't have Vapor, but yeah, it was kind of like I looked at Vue's API surface and then implemented it using our fine grained, uh, thing before Vapor existed or whatever, like using DOM expressions. So like I imagine it's almost like replacing the clone template with a few other details. But that, yeah, no, that's cool. Anyway, so, I mean that's one of the benefits of this change. When Svelte was completely compiled, it was actually harder to build like Svelte for terminal or 3D. Like Rich made specific versions of the compiler to do that. Now that you have signals in this setup, building universal stuff, kind of like the way React does, where you can just target any platform, becomes actually very, very straightforward, and you don't need a virtual DOM. So, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. It's been very useful for us. We have like solid 3, so it's kind of like 3 fiber, but for solid, people have been making 3D games for solid for the last couple of years using our extension. Obviously, Svelte has one similar, but now it doesn't have to be specific. It can be like a generic one. That's pretty cool. Yeah. To be fair, like I didn't know what I needed, so I just looked at the surface area view. If you look, the internals are mostly just like any other of our DOM expression libraries. What do we got here? Vibe coding. I don't have much to say about vibe coding. I think I talked about it earlier. Um, it's like the complete opposite way to where I code, but I actually think most things should be product led. So like it's reasonable to me. It's just funny when you see like it's also like the epitome of like what's wrong with AI. like where like you just know you're going to end up with the complete garbage, but it doesn't matter as long as you create the right product. You just, you know what I mean? So it's not a way to do engineering, you know? More than we can friends. Yeah. I've been sorry, I just caught that. I've been there are some tech personalities and people in Portland that I've, you know, in the community there. I'll be interested to see how moving there is. I to be fair, in San Jose, I've been actually pretty isolated. I went to San Fran a little bit, but Jack Harrington and Jason Langstrom are both in Portland. So um, yeah, I don't know if there's what the tech community is Portland. I guess I'll find out. Uh, we talked about this. Our streaming is live. Okay, cool. And then let's look if I have any bookmarks. All right. We talked about these. Okay, I'm making bold claims. Very well if you don't like it. Oh, Delaney exposes alien signals. I guess this is on point. Let's see if I have a couple minutes to talk about this. Um, I watched this morning for the first time. I just bookmarked it before without watching it, and then I think I bookmarked it again because I didn't realize I didn't watch it. Um, it's interesting. Basically, he was the premise, at least what I got from this video, and it might be worth people watching if they want. I can link it in the chat. Is um yeah, let me think here. Sorry, new comments on my old thing, but basically the gist of it is he's like, look, why are you doing all this traversal and all this complicated stuff when literally if you know the dependencies, you just run the thing. And it's funny, that was like the premise that we did when we started building Marco 6. But I think most cases fixed dependencies like compiler based, like that's how Svelte 5 are 3 and 4 worked to degree. And Molina, which, as I said, is the fastest on the JS framework network. That kind of reactivity we already showed, like improvement isn't actually going to improve like rendering that much. But conceptually, if you just know the depths ahead of time, then you're not doing all this like song and dance, so to speak. There is a bit of a question on traversal. And for Marco, they actually decided that because of the traversal dynamic, it was actually easier or more straightforward to actually keep a runtime thing, but then compile in places where they knew that they could be strict. And I think Svelte was talking about similar optimizations, except Svelte could only do it a local scope because, you know, you've processed a single file. Marco creates some crazy cross-file thing that literally tracks the reactive dependencies across your whole application and outputs the smallest possible bundle and is resumable. And it's basically insane. And also not released yet. Marco 6. But the thing is, it was funny doing that exploration, building the prototypes, building that stuff. Generally speaking, the challenge that we couldn't, one of the most powerful things in reactivity is stores. And like we talked about them a ton today, and deep tracking and all that stuff. And it becomes very difficult from an analysis standpoint to know like what updates when you have an assignment to some nested object somewhere reactively that can be passed around in piecewise, like to actually track the reactivity of things that can be broken apart into little pieces and then actually at compile time. Because how should I put it? Like even with, let's pretend we have split effects where we have like, or split memos, split everything, like where we actually have explicit dependencies that don't change. And you just know that, first of all, those dependencies have to be like signals themselves, right? Because you don't want to run them. You have to know that they are signals, right? From a compiler standpoint. So like arbitrary functions don't work anymore, which is kind of like the keystone of what I built with Solid, right? Unless you're kind of pushed to wrapping stuff reactively, like be like turn into a signal or a memo, any kind of arbitrary expression. Now, if you had enough control of the system, as like Marco did, and presumably what Delaney's doing here at Datastar, you could get around that for the shallow case. But for the nested case, I think it is challenging. I think dynamic dependencies at change of runtime are one of the pretty crazy claims here. But the gist of this, as I understood it, is it's 60 times faster in like these crazy in our reactivity benchmarks because it doesn't have to do any of the processing the reactive system does because it's not processing stuff at runtime. It literally just has fixed steps. And I think it's funny. Dominic from Inferno actually had a version of these benchmarks like a year or two ago, and he's also Svelte 5, where he actually showed me. He's like, "Look, this new reactive system is way fast," and he was doing compiled stuff like that. Obviously, in the end, like that's not what they ended up doing, because like um, it only works in a single file, etc. But whatever the way they did it, so like they have optimizations, but like for the benchmark purposes, like they ended up not using it. But he showed me incredibly fast results that like beat everything else at the time. I don't know how that compares to alien signals, but it's kind of like we're going potentially really far off a deep end in terms of performance here in a way that doesn't actually impact anything. And there's a risk of sacrificing the dynamicism if we give this up, especially where things do make a difference. Because stores, like we were showing with Deep, I mean, if you can do smart things with stores, you can change the execution characteristics. Obviously, that was Deep was optimizing doing dumb things with stores, but like the thing that React can't do with its compiler is have some data at the top, update one thing fine grained somewhere else in the tree anywhere, and have it update one thing else. Even with the compiler, if React needs to get back down the tree, it has to cancel out its memoization along that path. It's immutable, and it has to rerun those components. And even though some of the stuff on the leaves on the other side are, cached or memoized, it still needs to redo that work. Fine-grained reactivity, being able to kind of transcend and run through your whole app and then update it pinpoint, is something, whether it's nested signals or stores or proxy, whatever that we're going to use, is a superpower that is very hard for a compiler these days to emulate. If someone does solve that, though, hats off to you, then you've done it. But on the surface, just saying like it's 60 times faster because the upser fixed is kind of like, yeah. I mean, like there's not, it's kind of like the obvious thing. Like it's the thing that crosses your mind, and then you're like, yeah, but we realistically can't do that. Or as we scale it up, this is going to be a limitation that doesn't work for us, or it's going to actually cause the performance push to be somewhere else. Anyway, we are top on Hack News. I haven't been able to, but I see I am on screen. Yeah. We're just talking about the 60 times faster thing. Is that what's on Hacker News? Because if so, that's kind of like fake news. Yeah, exactly. Like if you shorten the pipe, then you're not gonna need it. Oh no, some article. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, anyways, it's interesting and very in topic with what we're talking about again. Um, if you can change the paradigm altogether, then you can, in theory, make these kind of monumental shifts. Like if this shift, as I said, the shift I don't think has an impact like on rendering, as we showed earlier, because we use alien signals and it basically made no difference. That on the rendering side, but if this kind of shift can suddenly unlock the performance in a different vector or angle, then these are the kind of things that push the whole thing forward. An example of this was fine grained rendering. Before fine grained rendering, a lot of like even the fastest VDOMs were slower. We improved performance 20-30% in an actual like visible way. Sometimes it's a matter of finding the right benchmarks. It's interesting. As I said, if someone can solve nested reactivity via compilation, there would be an opportunity for this. Anyways. So our 60 minutes is no op. Yeah. We worked with them to make Alien 2 times faster. Nice. And our intro is faster by more. I see. That's the best part about it. If we can actually find new optimizations from shortcutting, that is the win, right? As I said, it's ironic in a stream where I basically said that the performance aspect of alien signals is probably the least interesting, but it. I mean, I count that as a win. Okay, let's see here. React server components are nice and near, but 5 years in, it just isn't working out. It's been fun. React, you taught me a lot. Have fun with the React server. Dom me as new video. I'm done. Where are you going, Michael Jackson? Yeah. So is he going to Preact? Yeah. Yeah. This, yeah. This is like the checkout of React path. People, I, it makes sense. If you like old React and you just want to keep it small and simple, Preact is a clear choice. It's not breaking the bank. It's not changing anything fundamental. It's not. It's a little, maybe a little bit faster than React. It's not a bad place to be. Uh, this was a little interesting side note. Class actually works. You don't have to use class name. I guess the TypeScript doesn't work, but apparently they do support React agreed to rename class. They said this in April Fool's joke, but in reality, this is apparently real, which makes sense. I mean, kind of, there's no reason not to support it, probably, except for two ways to do the same thing. I've been learning that's a terrible thing. So we've actually yeah. Solid 2.0 combines all the class stuff, class list, class name, class whatever, into a single property. No more of that. This is a cool article. I don't have time to go over it today. But Eduardo, I worked with him at Netlify. Very thoughtful, working on the platform team there. I think AI is something we always think about, but if I remember the gist of it, he's talking about like how much easier it is to go from like inception to the end point. He's saying like you're building more builders or creators this way, right? Which is cool, right? You lower the boundary every time you do that. You can get new, unique, interesting things, which is really the win, right? Because different people think different ways, and if you get enough people thinking different ways, you can actually, that's where things shift. Like we were just talking to Delaney about like approaching the reactivity problem a different way. That breeds more innovation, even if not the direct thing beside besides itself. Like it leaves a wake, and I think there's value there. But I don't think AI is a topic that I'm going to talk much on stream or I really care about. Everyone's like, I saw this week, everyone's like AI this, AI this in the future, and it's just like it doesn't impact what I do at all. So like I'm aware of it from the standpoint of like what people can use these tools for and how they're approaching things. But it's like I mean, it helps me fill in when I did Chat GPT, or sorry, Copilot helps me fill in when I lazy filling out some code. But often I just like when I'm doing a lot of things, I have to just throw it away because I read the Copilot code and I go, I see what you think you're doing, but I'm working a completely different zone here. Like Copilot only knows what it's seen, and I often build things it's never seen before. So yeah, it's interesting. Ultimately, yes, because I think stores will allow the break apart, like the reactivity granularly enough. And we've been working on derived stores as well, like projections. So this idea that a combination of diffing and piecewise writes at different locations will be able to propagate changes in the most granular and modular way, which will allow real-time systems, especially if the source information coming across is granular, like piecewise. If we know like, hey, this is updated, like the database is like, you added this one row, if you can propagate from start to end on like the diff information, you have the ability to just like skip diffing. Essentially, it makes things like React seem completely pointless and obsolete. So like the key to it is if we can keep that granularity throughout, then like I think this is why I've spent a lot of time looking in these zones at these solutions in this thing, because there's a real natural fit here. The funny thing is, if your Morphlayer works good, I'll be coming back to you. I think this is the secret to HTMX, or the diffing between the markup of the static parts is a problem we're going to revisit again in the future. I I think partials like we have with HTMX could be a part of a really important solution. I just think it's like it's the most primitive. Like I don't. It's a very primitive part of the solution. So like if these morph DOM things are very effective, I would love to get in there and use it. It it's just I couldn't leave them to their own orchestration. I don't care about the HTMX directives and all that. It's the actual HTML diffing mechanism that and DOM diffing that is going to be important here. Um, Partials are a thing, but they have to be controlled or orchestrated in a certain way if you actually want to have certain properties true, especially in terms of solving things like double data, and if you want to ensure that people aren't doing dumb stuff like causing waterfalls. This is an area that I do think actually needs significant guardrails. So it's a design question problem. But if the technology and this is why I pay attention to this stuff. If the technology involves in the meanwhile, I think it's very, very interesting. Okay. The thing is, I've been working with the guys that have taken over, and we've gone our own road. It's awesome. Okay. Durable objects are free tier. That is cool. No one understands or knows how to use them, but they're very capable. That I'm hoping this encourages people. That's awesome, Sunil. React Conf is back, not just Next Conf. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think they did this last year too, but there's a time period where everything didn't feel like it was React anymore. Good on you. Johnson doing his part. I have to imagine that he create selector here. As we saw using, unless there's something fancy he was doing with the code. We saw these results on stream today that alien signals would improve the selector code, but I don't know if they could improve them that much. I wonder if he did something like create selector. If he did this natively without create selector, I'm impressed. But again, always skeptical of results that aren't official. This is if there is a naive way to solve this problem, I am very interested. Yeah, and this is the same video we talked about. Okay, I hit the end of the list. That's awesome, and we're not bad on time. I have to be going. We've been going for over 5 hours now, so yeah, I don't know. Does this new time work for people? I know it's a little earlier. I overlap a bit with Primeagen, but I don't think our audience overlap very much, anyways. Every time he drops people here, I'd say something absurd to piss off those back end people. So yeah, great for you on the one. I mean, fair question. No, not really. It's like the benefits of the React compiler you don't need. Like Solid just works that way already. Or I mean, technically it works a bit more performantly, but it's also like maybe arguably slightly less ergonomic. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, the type of compiler you get is probably syntax based, right? Anyone who hasn't seen it should probably see Solid labels by Alexis, and he made this project about 5 years ago now, and basically he has these things called $sign with like called labels, which have $sign and then the name like signal and effect, and then you just use the variable directly, and then you don't have to like call it as a function or do dot value. And as I said, he made this about 5 years ago, and I've never, I've seen this in Svelte. So basically that is the sort of that is the sort of thing that where I could see people doing stuff. Like React compiler doesn't solve split effects or dependency eraser effects. They just solve memoization. So like we've had this for 5 years. I just don't see the big deal. Otherwise, like I guess we would have had our own labels instead of runes, whatever you want to call them, 5 years ago. If those are even solid color, it'd be like Marco 6. I like the transparency. I like the rules being consistent. I saw this 5 years ago, thought there was issues, like where it made it hard to teach things. Svelte seems to 5 years later seems to think differently. I I think it fits better with their philosophy. So I guess we'll see how that goes for them. But personally, yeah, if it would be like Marco, yeah. So far, we've been able to do everything runtime, and which is crazy when you consider the async stuff. Maybe there'll be a time, but right now, I like the fact that like literally you just compile JSX. That's it. That's all. It's just like Reactor stuff. All the JavaScript code is yours. Compiler could be to convert dynamic depth static process with that small performance boost that probably doesn't matter. Yes. That's that. I mean, the trickiest part is you need it like Marco where you can trace the depths back, I think, because locally, I don't know if you're going to see that advantage very much. It's when you can, yeah. I mean, I've looked at a lot of compilation stuff. Like Solid does some cool stuff if you look at it. Even though we work only on the JSX, we do stuff like inline expressions in certain places or pull it concept. Like there are things like that. I did look at one point thinking like, oh, maybe I can inline components and make templates larger, within the same file. Like if you could tell that stuff was used a certain way, then you could like because the larger the template, the more you can clone it, there's performance improvements there. But I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, I'll have to check this one out later. I gotta go. I'm over time, so I think, yeah. Thanks for everyone joining the stream. I appreciate all of you spending the time learning with me, sharing your ideas. I mean, this is how things happen, right? We talk, we communicate, we try ideas. People like Alexis making solid labels 5 years ago, or what was another thing that was 5 years ago on stream. Yeah, I made a like basically Vue Vapor 5 years ago too. So like just being able to like constantly push the boundaries. I love this part of my job. Obviously, people have real apps to build as well, and we have a bunch of people working to make that a reality. But this time on stream is when I get to have fun with you guys, and I really really appreciate it. So thank you. You guys have a great weekend, and catch you soon. Maybe not next week, maybe the week after. I'm doing basically like every second weekish. We'll see. But you have a good one. All right.